What if your worst day happened in the spotlight, right before the biggest night of your career? Danielle had it all under control, until a smug TSA agent tore her $4,000 dress in front of a crowd. Ever had a moment where fate feels flawless, right before it flips on you? Danielle Kingsley had one of those days. It was a sun-drenched Thursday in late September, the Phoenix sky casting that soft golden glow. Not blazing, not brisk, just balanced. She stood outside Sky Harbor's Terminal 3, suitcase by her side, her ride long gone, and a ticket to the most career-defining gala tucked in her purse. Adjusting her shades, Danielle smoothed her custom-made emerald silk gown and moved toward the doors, exuding elegance without asking for it. At 38, Danielle wasn't just stylish, she was razor-sharp and one of the most sought-after event planners in the region. Corporations booked her for six-figure soirees. Politicians pleaded for her touch on their campaigns. Her brand was perfection, and tonight's black tie gala in Santa Barbara was a game-changer. The keynote? A tech billionaire. The crowd? Power players with the ability to shift her future with a simple introduction. But beneath her polished stride, Danielle was drained. 3 weeks of nonstop events, a toddler haunted by night terrors, and a husband, Julian, managing business calls and a sick lab back home. She needed this trip to go off without a hitch. Naturally, it didn't. Rolling her sleek carry-on to security, her heels tapped rhythmically as she mentally rehearsed the toast she'd soon deliver. The line was mercifully short. She handed over her ID with a practiced smile and passed the scanner with ease, or so she assumed. "Ma'am," a voice called out, too casual, too loud. A young TSA agent, name tag reading Co. Fuller, approached with a cocky grin like he'd just scored a win. "Random secondary screening," he said. Danielle paused. "I already cleared." "Still random," he shot back. She glanced toward the supervisor, older, disengaged. Other lines flowed freely. She knew the feeling. Polished or not, you still get picked. Danielle didn't push back. That wasn't her way. She followed Fuller aside. "Arms out," he instructed. She obeyed. His pat-down was excessive, fingers pressing too long, movements exaggerated. "You sure this is a real dress?" he asked, tugging on the strap. "It's custom," she replied calmly. "Please don't pull." Checking for wires, he shrugged, then yanked harder. A sharp rip sliced the air. Gas followed. Danielle froze. The dress split from armpit to hip, her left side exposed. One hand clutched the torn fabric. The other still hung in the air. Around her, no one moved. Eyes stared. Voices whispered. No one stepped forward. Humiliated in public, Danielle thought she had to swallow her pain in silence, until one call to her husband revealed a twist she never saw coming. The airport? He owned it. Kay Fuller glanced at the damage he'd caused, just briefly. For half a heartbeat, something like panic crossed his face, but it quickly vanished beneath a smug tilt of his shoulders. "My bad," he muttered. "Get dressed, then come back through." Danielle didn't respond. She couldn't. Her jaw stayed clenched, fingers twitching slightly as she turned away without a word. She moved toward a quiet corner by the wall, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. But this moment wasn't just about a ruined gown. It was about being publicly stripped of dignity, reduced in front of onlookers who said nothing. Danielle sat, coat awkwardly pinned over the torn dress, knees pressed together, one heel dangling off. Her suitcase remained untouched beside her while her phone rested on her lap like lead. She hadn't cried, not yet, but her throat burned and her thoughts tumbled. Shame clung to her like sweat in thick air. She could still feel their eyes, hear the silence that followed the rip, and see the agent's smirk, unchanged even after the damage. She hadn't hoped for an apology. She wasn't naive. But she hadn't braced for outright malice either. And that's what it felt like. Deliberate. Cruel. Danielle took a slow breath and finally tapped a name. The line rang twice before a steady, grounding voice answered. "Hey, babe," Julian said. "You boarding soon?" Her silence stretched too long. "Danny," she cleared her throat, "I need you to hear this. And please, don't get upset." His tone shifted instantly. "What happened?" She walked him through every detail, the singling out, the pressure of the pat-down, the sound of the seam tearing, and the way people just stood there, watching. Julian said nothing while she spoke, not even once. He listened until her voice cracked, and then asked one quiet question. "What was his name?" "Fuller," she whispered. "He looked proud of himself." There was a pause. She could hear him breathing, pacing, thinking. She pictured it, hand to chin, jaw set, mind already moving. And then he said the words that made her blink. "You remember that holding company I mentioned last year, the one we acquired for infrastructure development?" "Yeah," she said. "It owns Sky Harbor." Her breath caught. "Wait, what?" Julian's tone was calm but cold now. "I didn't bring it up before because it wasn't important, but now it is." Danielle didn't answer. She didn't know what to feel, relief, fury, shock. She just watched the crowd sweep past her like she was invisible. "You okay?" Julian asked softly. She inhaled. "I will be." He exhaled, steady. "Stay put. Don't move. I'll handle this." "Julian, I'm not trying to cause a scene," Danielle murmured. "You're not," he replied, "but I won't let this slide." What Danielle didn't realize was that within minutes of that call, 3 departments across airport operations had already begun reviewing security footage. Meanwhile, back near the TSA break room, Officer K. Fuller leaned against a wall, laughing with a colleague. "Did you see her face?" he snorted. "Like I'd ever touch a dress that pricey on purpose. She should be grateful, probably knock off anyway." His fellow agent, older and visibly uneasy, glanced around and muttered, "You know they have cameras, right?" Fuller rolled his eyes. "Please. Half of it's erased in a day. No one cares." He was mistaken. Moments later, a woman in a sharp black suit stepped into the hall, Homeland Security badge gleaming. "Agent Fuller," she said evenly, "you'll need to come with me." His grin wavered. "This about the screening?" he asked, already fixing his posture. He followed her, unsure. But it didn't take long to see this wasn't routine. A meeting room was prepped. A regional TSA director sat waiting. A legal advisor appeared on screen. And behind them, paused on a monitor, was a wide-angle shot from the security cam. Fuller's hands on Danielle's gown, the moment the seam gave way. No sound needed. The frame said it all. "This is a formal misconduct hearing," the supervisor stated. "You're on immediate leave while we proceed. You're not to engage with passengers or staff until further notice." Fuller opened his mouth, but no words followed. They caught in his throat. Back in the terminal, Danielle sat unaware of the quiet fire already ignited on her behalf. But the real damage wasn't the fabric. It was in how no one stepped in when it mattered. Eventually, she moved to a vacant gate further down, a spot where no one would recognize her or pretend not to. She cinched her coat tighter around her knees, phone resting on her lap. She wasn't furious anymore, not outwardly. But something fundamental inside her had shifted. This wasn't about pride or vengeance. It was about that critical moment when people choose to treat your humanity like an afterthought. And she wouldn't let that go unchallenged. 20 minutes later, the airport supervisor approached, polite but uneasy, his tone careful. "Mrs. Kingsley," he began, "on behalf of the airport authority and TSA, I want to sincerely apologize for what occurred earlier. An immediate review is already underway." Danielle slowly looked up. Danielle raised an eyebrow. That was quick. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. We received a call from one of our investment partners, Mr. Julian Kingsley. She gave a quiet nod. That's my husband. He swallowed. He's highly regarded, but please know this is being treated seriously, regardless of that connection. Danielle let the pause linger before responding. I'm not asking for favors. I want accountability, for me and for every woman who doesn't have someone like Julian to make that call. The supervisor finally met her eyes and nodded. We understand. He handed over a sleek black folder. This is the initial report. You have every right to move forward. Legal action, press, whatever you choose. The footage is secured. We're ready to cooperate. She accepted the file. It didn't feel like leverage. It felt like weight. Danielle had no desire for lawsuits or headlines. What she wanted was simple. For Officer Fuller to look her in the eye and understand she wasn't just another woman in a nice dress. She was a whole human being. Her flight, rescheduled for that evening, finally boarded. She wore a gift shop sweatshirt and yoga pants from her carry-on. She hadn't planned to need them, but life doesn't ask. It just moves. When she landed in Santa Barbara, the gala was already underway. She didn't have time for glamour. She didn't care. Hair flawless, demeanor intact, she arrived late and low-key. The room of black ties turned. Her assistant Mara rushed up. Danielle, are you okay? Danielle smiled gently and squeezed her hand. I'm good. Let's find my seat. That evening she gave her toast. No sequins, no silk, just truth. I was going to talk about connection, she told the crowd, glass lifted. But connection means nothing without respect. In work, in friendships, even in 5 minutes at a checkpoint, how we treat each other when we hold power, that defines us. The room held its breath. Even the servers froze. So tonight, she continued, I raise my glass to dignity. Not the kind wrapped in status or wealth, but the kind that shows up in basic, everyday decency. That's what we all deserve. A soft clink, then applause. Standing. She hadn't expected it, but she needed it. Still, something inside her wasn't settled. Closure for her meant being heard. 3 days later, she returned to Sky Harbor, not as a traveler, but with purpose. No makeup, no jewelry, a plain black blazer, clean sneakers, hair in a bun. She looked ready because she was. A legal rep from the holding group walked beside her, quiet but present. She already understood the structure, the process, the access Julian made sure she had. At the end of the corridor, a glass-paneled conference room waited. Inside, 2 TSA supervisors, an airport HR rep, a union representative, and Officer K. Fuller. He didn't recognize her right away. Not without the dress, not like this. But when she sat across from him, face steady, his posture shifted. The room went still. The HR rep spoke first. We're here for a mediated conversation regarding the Thursday incident between Mrs. Danielle Kingsley and Officer Kyle Fuller. This session is private and will not be recorded. Danielle leaned forward, voice unwavering. I don't want justifications. I came so he could listen, so he could actually see me. Fuller adjusted in his seat, smirk nowhere in sight. You saw a black woman in a gown and chose to make her your mark, she said. You broke protocol. You disrespected me. You embarrassed me in front of strangers. And you ruined something important. Not just fabric, but something you clearly don't value. Fuller tried to respond. I didn't mean to tear it. It was part of the search. I wasn't thinking. Exactly, she cut in. You weren't thinking. You didn't care. And you assumed no one would call you on it. The supervisor stayed silent. They'd seen the footage, seen his face in that frame. This wasn't about whether it happened. It was about what came after. Danielle turned to the HR rep. I'm not here for a payout, she said firmly. I don't. I don't want a PR-crafted apology, Danielle said calmly. I want this man's conduct officially documented in his personnel file, so the next woman he treats this way doesn't end up in a corner of an airport deciding between tears and rage. The HR rep nodded, taking notes. And I want immediate implementation of new training protocols covering gender sensitivity, physical boundaries, and escalation procedures. The supervisors exchanged a brief look. That's reasonable, one agreed. Fuller finally spoke, his voice sharp with resentment. You trying to ruin my career? Danielle didn't flinch. You did that all by yourself. No one came to his defense. The meeting wrapped soon after. Fuller was placed on unpaid leave pending the results of a formal investigation. Danielle didn't linger. There was nothing to celebrate. She left the same way she entered, focused, steady, and done explaining herself. Outside, Julian leaned against their car, arms crossed. He waited until she was close. How'd it go? Danielle slid on her sunglasses. Productive? He opened the door for her. Hungry? A hint of a smile curved her lips. Only if there are fries, and no questions. They drove off, the airport shrinking in the rearview mirror, the road ahead wide and open. A few days later, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address, typed, unsigned. At the bottom, from someone who was there. The message was brief. I didn't speak up when I should have. I watched what he did and I froze. I'm sorry. It wasn't right. Danielle folded the letter and placed it gently in her desk drawer. It didn't change what happened, but it mattered. Someone had seen her, and maybe next time they'd act. Even with action taken, one question lingered in her mind like an echo. What if she hadn't had connections? What if she wasn't believed? That thought became her quiet fire. Danielle didn't post about it. No headlines, no viral tweets. She didn't need an audience to prove it was real. But that didn't mean she stayed quiet. Within weeks, she teamed up with a trusted civil rights attorney and a grassroots advocacy group focused on traveler protections. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be. They worked on real solutions. Mandatory body cams for TSA officers during random checks, transparent complaint tracking, third-party oversight boards at major airports. Her name opened doors. Julian's network kept them open. But what drove the movement was something deeper, her story and the hundreds that followed. Strangers wrote in, sharing moments of humiliation, of silence, of being touched or shamed with no way to fight back. Danielle had become more than a voice. She was a mirror, and that came with weight. Still, some nights, after her son was asleep and the house fell quiet, she'd think back to the sound of the rip, the way her breath caught, the heat in her chest, not because she hadn't healed, but because remembering reminded her exactly why she stood up. One evening, while prepping for a corporate gala in San Diego, she stood near the dessert table, reviewing final notes when a young woman approached, clipboard clutched tightly in her arms. "Excuse me, are you Danielle Kingsley?" Danielle turned, her expression curious. "Depends who's asking," she said with a kind smile. The woman chuckled nervously. "Sorry, I'm Amamira. I'm interning with the event vendor team. I saw your name on the planning sheet and thought it might be you." She paused, gathering her courage. "My cousin told me what happened at the airport and how you handled it." Her voice softened. She said it gave her hope. Danielle's smile shifted gentler, quieter. "She's in law school now," Amamira continued, eyes shining. "She said she wants to be the kind of person who makes sure women like you never have to justify their pain." Danielle didn't know what to say right away. So she just nodded and said softly, "Tell her to keep going," Danielle finally said. "We need more people like her." That moment lingered, Not because it was dramatic, but because it proved something she already believed. Impact doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's one person watching, listening, deciding to be better because of what you did. And for Danielle, that was enough. A few weeks later, the TSA quietly rolled out a revised screening protocol. Updated training focused on sensitivity, clear boundaries, an improved reporting system that didn't bury complaints behind red tape or arbitrary thresholds. Danielle's name wasn't in the press release. It didn't need to be. The shift had already started with her. As for the dress, it still hung in the back of her closet, neatly folded, tucked in a garment bag, untouched since that day. She never replaced it, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't need to. It wasn't a symbol of what was broken. It was a reminder of what she reclaimed, her voice, her worth, her refusal to let someone else define her value. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you wear isn't fabric. It's your boundaries, your story, your strength, and no one can tear that from you. If you've ever been dismissed, humiliated, or made to feel like your voice didn't matter, this is your reminder. You're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. And you're not alone. Speak up, even if your voice shakes. And if you see someone being treated unfairly, don't just stand there. Say something, because silence doesn't protect the person. It protects the problem. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've lived something like this, tell your story. Together, we remind the world, respect isn't a privilege, it's a right.